So I think we are all familiar with the famous phrase that goes hidden in plain sight. Well, that definitely applies to the person I'm about to talk to you about today, whose name is Benjamin Welton, and he was an elementary school teacher. At least that's what he went by during the day. But other times, such as when he was off the clock, he went by something else. No, not a whole nother name. Well, probably another name, but he had a whole separate identity as far as what he did as a profession. So, like I said, he was an elementary school teacher by the name of Benjamin Welton, but it has been exposed that this guy lived a secret life as a white nationalist writer. Yes, hidden in plain sight. I and many others have said before in the past that when it comes to people like this, they have ditched the hoods and the Klan's robes and have blended in with society. And this is a perfect example of that, because the thing is, he might have come off as this, I don't know, this innocent looking person, but innocence only goes but so far as appearances goes. You got to prove if you're actually an innocent person or not. But this guy right here was around children as a teacher, while on the back end was a white nationalist writer. And I was reading the comments, someone said they need to check the grades that he put in and for who he gave grades to and how did he grade them. And I wholeheartedly agree. But I'm going to go ahead and read this article and see what else we can find out. It says Benjamin Welton uses pen names to write racist articles. He's also a teacher, a PhD student, and freelance writer for major media outlets. Now he has been exposed. In 2017, a writer named Sinclair Jenkins published an essay for the white supremacist website American Renaissance titled From Wide-Eyed Liberal to Race Realist, which describes a series of political awakenings that he had experienced. Jenkins wrote that his radicalization began in the Navy, where it angered him to see quote-unquote blacks be mean to his fellow white sailors. Later in graduate school, he grew disgusted over the ingrained culture of anti-white hatred in academia. Also, once I began paying attention to the news, I started seeing why so many people in my hometown took a dim view of blacks, wrote Jenkins, who noted that he grew up somewhere in Appalachia. After Ferguson in Baltimore, I understood that pumping money into the ghetto would never fix things. Later, he said, he discovered writers like John Derbyshire and Ann Coulter, aka Skeletor, who shared his distaste for immigrants, in websites like American Renaissance and VDare, which shared his firmly held belief in biological foundations to race and helped shape his white nationalist worldview. Near the end of the article, Jenkins noted that he was a teacher, an audacious admission to make in a white supremacist publication. So he pretty much blew his own damn whistle. But quote unquote Sinclair Jenkins, HuffPost has now confirmed, is really a pseudonym for Benjamin Welton, a 33-year-old Boston University history PhD candidate who until this week taught English, social studies, and computer science at Star Academy, an elementary school in Massachusetts. When HuffPost contacted the school for comment, Welton was put on leave and was fired shortly before this article was published. For years, he has also worked as a freelance writer for major media outlets, including The Atlantic and Vice, for whom he published articles about esoteric, spy, and detective novels. He also wrote pieces for the Daily Caller and the Weekly Standard, which let him make his racist sympathies clear in print. He was meanwhile using multiple pen names to secretly author fascist screeds online, in some cases advocating violence to establish a whites-only ethno-state. No mercy for our enemies. Do not weep, for they are not human. Welton wrote in a pseudonymous social media post on March 30th, 7 months into his job as an elementary school teacher. Treat those who want to abolish whiteness with the same venom, if not more. They deserve medieval punishments. Mind you, he's still writing all of this while he's still not even a whole year into being a teacher. So like I said, this guy is very racist. He has a very anti-black view. And it makes me wonder how he graded those black students' work, unless he found a way to work in a place where he didn't have to deal with many black students or black kids. Like many conservatives, Welton has expressed anger about the teaching of critical race theory in American schools. Last August, shortly before he began teaching at the Star Academy, he tweeted under a pseudonym that a return to American greatness requires defunding critical race theory. It's clear from his pseudonym writings where his real objection lies: criticism of white people. I now try to inject race realism into my working life, he wrote as Jenkins in the 2017 American Renaissance article. When I teach my students or write papers, I refuse to engage in cultural Marxism or an anti-white rhetoric. And like I said, that goes back to where a lot of these individuals want to get rid of critical race theory, because like the article stated, to talk about critical race theory would mean to put that mirror of reflection up in front of PC people that they do not like to have in front of them. See, they've been able to go and flow through life without having to be criticized that much, especially when it comes to what they've done to us. But now that it's in their face, they can't handle it. And they don't want to deal with it. So they want to run away from a problem they created and they put the problem onto the people that they've been giving a problem to for all these years. That's not how this works. If you had left us to our own devices, and you had plenty of times to actually do that, and technically you still can, but see, by this time it's already too late. The damage has been done, and it's still continuing, and we're still here dealing with the damages of the past to this day. And all you do, instead of trying to rectify it, is to add and pour on and stack onto the issue, or simply put a band-aid over a flesh wound. A group of anti-fascist researchers, the Anonymous Comrades Collective, figured out Welton's double life and shared the details with HuffPost. Many nameless fascists today lead double lives, hiding behind avatars to promote their noxious beliefs online while holding down respectable day jobs in education, military, law enforcement, medicine, and the government. But leading an extremist life online carries the risk of exposure and the fear that one day soon it may all come crashing down, something it appears Welton may have anticipated. Welton did not respond to HuffPost's repeated requests for comment. After emailing and direct messaging him last week, he deleted all of his pseudonym social media accounts on Twitter, POAST, and Gab, all of which he used to spew racist invective. Along with his LinkedIn profile, SoundCloud account, 2 Substacks, a blogspot page, and an online magazine he recently launched for fascist fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. But the content of those pages was already saved and archived by the Anonymous Comrades Collective, who earlier this month showed HuffPost evidence they had collected indicating that Welton was not only the man behind the byline, Sinclair Jenkins, but also Jake Boyer and Elias Kingston. His writing had started to generate interest among major figures on the far right. So this guy literally lived 4 different identities. The one that we're talking about now as the teacher, and 3 others that he wrote under to try to cover his tracks. But he didn't really cover his tracks because in the beginning it stated that he put down that he was a teacher. Welton's career as a teacher didn't begin at Star Academy. He had taught at the University of Vermont and Boston University during his postgraduate studies. On his since-deleted LinkedIn page, Welton claimed to be currently teaching grades 2 through 5 at Star Academy, leading 7 classes a day, both online and in person. Earlier this week, before they fired Welton, Star Academy administrators said in an email statement that they had not been aware of the concerning online publications allegedly made by a teacher at the school. Star Academy, the statement continued, is committed to a diverse and inclusive community and embraces our responsibility as an educational institution to foster a safe and healthy environment for our students. We do not support, condone, or agree with white supremacism and white separatist ideologies. After HuffPost's inquiry, Star Academy deleted the faculty page from his website, which had included a photo of Welton and a brief description of his job. The photo, which appears to be a selfie, shows Welton wearing a shirt, tie, and sweater in front of a chalkboard and a wry, toothless smile on his face. Written on the chalkboard behind him is Dollful 1934, a likely reference to Engelbert Dollfuss, an Austrian fascist politician who briefly served as the country's chancellor until his assassination in 1934. It's unclear in what context the fascist name, replete with the unique German letter B, also known as a sharp S, was written on the chalkboard, or whether it was Welton who wrote it. Star Academy said the photo was not taken on their premises. Spokesman for the University of Vermont and said Boston University said it was impossible to tell if the photo was taken on their respective campuses. The Boston University spokesman confirmed that Welton is currently a student there, but wouldn't comment on whether the school would investigate his white nationalist activism. The spokesman also wouldn't comment on why the school removed Welton's student profile page from his website on Tuesday night. In 2019, HuffPost reported that Dayana Volatich, a 25-year-old social studies teacher at a Florida middle school, had been secretly hosting a white nationalist podcast on which she bragged about radicalizing her students. That age when they first become teenagers is very critical, Volatich said in a podcast episode. They've already been indoctrinated for 12 years before coming to me. Some of them, I believe, were red-pilled as 13-year-olds, and I think that was kind of a cool thing to watch. I was watching them just open their eyes and seeing what's happening in this country. Being red pill is this is what the article said. Being red pill is alt-right lingo for awakening to white nationalist beliefs. But if you really break down what red pill is, it doesn't just mean what they just put in this article. It just means to be aware of the stuff that's happening in the world. Like, anybody could be red pill. Now, what you choose to do with it, that's a whole nother story. Volatich, who was reportedly told that students that the Klan was a good thing, was fired after HuffPost exposed her. Elsewhere in recent years, a charter school principal in New Orleans was fired after videos surfaced showing him wearing rings with white nationalist symbols, and a substitute teacher in Maryland who coached a high school field hockey team was fired after local media realized he was a prominent figure in a white nationalist group and had participated in the Daily Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. Notice that all these individuals that they're talking about are all in the school system somehow. Why? Because that's where the kids are. And like that one chick said, it's, they've been indoctrinated so long, so now she's trying to undo what's already been done, but also in a very radicalized form. There's no evidence Welton indoctrinated his students at Star Academy, but a scathing student review posted to Docity in 2012 while he was teaching at the University of Vermont offers a glimpse of his teaching style. A teacher with too many personal opinions and present them as facts, the review begins. Full of himself and misogynistic. I can tell that the person who wrote this is most likely a woman. A very unpleasant person overall, he can't help himself from spewing his proto-fascist, libertarian, anti-feminist, and neoconservative propaganda in front of the class. On March 8, 2021, a white nationalist account called the Spooky Nationalists on POA.st, a Twitter knockoff crawling with racists and extremists, posted a message that caught the attention of anti-fascist researchers. To show my hand, I am the Spooky Nationalist Confederate and Bayou and Hellbilly retard with two education, the post began. I write as Elias Kingston. I write as Sinclair Jenkins. I write as Jake Boyer. The Spooky Nationalist has slipped up. Announcing that all of these different aliases belonged to him was a clue that opened up new avenues to investigate his real online identity. The anti-fascists at the Anonymous Comrades Collective got to work. Interestingly, when we researched the pen name Jake Boyer, we found that the URL for the Jake Boyer Gravatar page displayed another name, Ben Welton. The anti-fascists wrote in a blog post published Monday. Gravatar is a service that creates globally unique avatars, according to his website, allowing users to use the same avatar across different internet platforms. There were other connections between the Spooky Nationalists and Welton. In March, the account posted a link for followers to buy a book called Sick Inside the Citadel. The author of this collection of short stories and poems, Benjamin Welton. In December 2020, the Spooky Nationalist wrote on his Twitter account, "Be on the lookout for the next issue of Military History magazine from H.net. The cover story will be about Raymond Westerling and the Dutch police actions in the East Indies. An article about Raymond Westerling did appear in the next issue of the Military History magazine. Its author again was listed as Welton." The Spooky Nationalists also sometimes revealed other sad or personal information that matches details from Welton's life. "I used to be suicidal," one post began. "A veritable incel. An ex stabbed me. Mom died. Life sucked until I found this mob. Now in my 30s, I'm writing novels, nonfiction, books, and training for the Foreign Legion. We're all gonna reach glory, dudes." Public records reviewed by HuffPost showed that Welton is in his 30s and that his mother died in 1999 when she was 39. "I was once in English grad school program," read another Spooky Nationalist post. "As a Navy vet, no self-respecting white man should join the U.S. military," read another. Welton's since deleted LinkedIn profile states that he got a master's in English at the University of Vermont, a fact the school confirmed in that he served in the Navy. A Navy spokesperson told HuffPost that Welton enlisted in the Navy Reserves in 2011 and left the military in 2018, having reached the rank of Master at Arms, second class as a member of the Naval Military Police. He received 2 awards during his time in the service, a National Defense Service Medal and a Pistol Marksmanship Ribbon. In another post, the Spooky Nashes implored his followers to submit writing to an online magazine he launched called The Lovecraft Conservative, named after the late horror fiction writer H.P. Lovecraft. And for those of you who don't know, that's where the show Lovecraft Country comes from on HBO. In an essay for the magazine, Elias Kingston, one of the Spooky Nash's pen names, wrote wistfully of being a son of Appalachia who has family in Elkins, West Virginia, but who now lives in Boston. Welton is currently enrolled at Boston University. Public records show he currently lives in Brighton, Massachusetts, and has family in Elkins, West Virginia. The Spooky Nashes rarely, if ever, mentioned what he did for a living, but in March he left a concerning clue that he might work with children. I have been consuming a lot of the Goosebumps series lately, the Spooky Nashes wrote in a Substack blog referring to the popular 1990s children's horror book series. Easy access to these classic paperbacks is one of the few picks of my day job. Since I usually read about 1 volume a night, I find myself returning to the small library of the macabre every morning. The Spooky Nashes, after acknowledging that Goosebumps author is Jewish, he writes with the spirit of deep America, even if his connections to said ethnos is tenuous, to wax poetic about being reconnected with the books. Whenever he saw the distinctive Goosebumps cover art, he wrote, I am immediately transported back to my ancestral home in Fairmont, West Virginia. I recall the feel of warm summer days, riding bikes on Avalon Road, and cool nights reading Goosebumps while waiting on the werewolves to howl outside my bedroom window. It was such a charmed childhood filled with mystery and adventure. Then it collapsed because of the cancer of the 1960s and the rotten ideas that turned so many of our parents into giant libidos and me first gimmies. Public records show that the Welton family having once lived in Avalon Road in Fairmont, West Virginia. Though Welton often employed pseudonyms, on other occasions he simply used his real name on far-right publications. In 2018, he wrote a racist article called Against Education for a far-right blog called The American Sun without using the pseudonym. Your typical man on the street in America 2018 AD will come up with a small catalog of answers about what to do with our education system. The race realist will speak of declining worldwide IQs and America's increasing mongrelization, driven by unassimilated races with below average intelligence capacities. That same year, Welton, writing under the name Sinclair Jenkins, called himself a race realist in the American Renaissance. So I'm still reading, but what I'm gathering is that this guy either just didn't care or he was sloppy with trying to keep his identity under wraps. But the thing is, he probably lost his way because he has so many damn identities. He went by like 4 different names. So it was probably hard for him to keep up. Welton's article argued that education should largely be reserved for geniuses, of which he seems to consider himself, not for the general dumber public. There is not a Rembrandt hidden in each booger eater, and the next Tesla is not currently marching toward the U.S. border from Guatemala. In other words, he's talking to white people here. For Terror House Mag, founded by prominent misogynist Matt Forney, Welton published fiction and poetry. Cold water rots the walls, but his finger sees her lovely lips to kiss away the dirt of former flings. For Social Matter, a neo-reactionary website, he wrote about 2 of his favorite subjects, spy novels and the British Empire. In Taki's Magazine, the paleo-conservative website founded by Greek-born socialite Taki Theodorakopoulos, a self-described anti-Semite with a history of hiring white supremacist editors, Welton wrote admiringly of Francisco Franco, the brutal fascist dictator of Spain. And as recently as March 21st, 2021, Welton's byline sat atop an article about spy novels in the Epoch Times, a right-wing newspaper with ties to China-based spiritual group Falun Gong that was deeply invested in re-electing 45. Even when writing in major right-wing outlets, Welton wasn't exactly holding his fascist sympathies. In December 2015, he wrote an article titled, What Exactly is the Alternative Right? For the since shuttered conservative site, The Weekly Standard. Welton clearly expresses excitement about the alternative right, in a rebranding of white nationalism, writing a movement, had taken the fight to the left in the best way possible, adding, rather than concede the moral high ground to the left, the alt-right turns the left's moralism on its head and makes it a badge of honor to be called racist, homophobic, and sexist. A year later, in December 2016, so I had to pause the video right quick. I'm not sure exactly where I stopped at, but let me just interject this. I'm actually thoroughly enjoying reading this. I know it's quite a bit, but I like that they're giving a lot of backstory about this guy instead of just saying, oh, he, was a white nationalist writer. He disguised himself as a teacher, or he was a teacher, because he actually had the certifications. He was actually a teacher. He wasn't pretending, but he had this double life. But I'm glad that they're like diving deep back into his background, because that's something that they would rarely ever do, except if it was us, of course. But I'm glad that they're doing it with him. So for, I know the video seems like it's long, but like, I just like to get the context of everything, because that's what they would do with us. So let me get back into it. Let's see. A year later, in December 2016, the Daily Caller published a virulently Islamophobic screed by which Welton titled it The European Quandary, in which he lashed out at different European countries for allowing in Muslim refugees. Europe, like panda bears, seems little interested in saving its own species, Welton wrote. Despite the fact that anyone with eyes can see that the recent influx of refugees from North Africa and the Middle East, a majority are not from Syria, don't believe that lie, has been a cultural disaster, few leaders and not enough voters seem to recognize it as a problem. The Cuccus europeanicus, he added, using a term he coined, is a blind, stubborn creature that refuses to smell the shawarma cooking right under its nose. A spokesman for the Daily Caller, a site founded by Fox News host Tucker Carlson, told HuffPost in a statement that these views are, of course, abhorrent to us. We are not privy to the details behind this one-off op-ed from 5 years ago, nor the editorial processes of Daily Caller's prior ownership when it comes to the thousands of earlier op-eds going back to its founding in 2010. The spokesman didn't address a HuffPost question regarding whether white nationalists frequently publishing work on the Daily Caller has ever inspired self-reflection among the site's editors. For Vice and The Atlantic, both major mainstream publications where he hasn't had a byline since 2015, Welton seemed to modulate his extremist views, writing about literature with a particular focus on spy novels and private eye detective stories. He has not written Vice in years. A Vice Media Group spokesman told HuffPost, noting that Welton was a freelancer who only published one story. The Atlantic didn't respond to a request for comment. It was under his fake pen names and on his social media accounts that Welton really let his fascist freak flag fly, and even started to attract a following. The Dare is a far-right nonprofit which recently bought a historic castle in Welton's native West Virginia. The website it runs is one of the most prominent white nationalist propaganda outlets in the country, and among its writers is Jake Bauer, one of Welton's pen names. So basically, it seems to me that no matter what company he wrote for, because he wrote for several, he used a different name under every single one, and even at one point used his actual name, if that's his real name. Welton has written half a dozen articles for the site, most recently in 2020 in October, including an article in which he argues that rape culture on college campuses is a myth, adding that if there were rapists in higher education, it was due to immigration. American college campuses today are essentially playgrounds for far-left agitators, anti-white elitists, and subsidized international students. He wrote, just as abroad, if there's a rape culture on campus, it is largely created because of the importation of third worlders. Welton has also published nearly 36 articles for American Renaissance under the name Sinclair Jenkins, most recently in September when he started teaching at Star Academy. While working as a teacher, he seems to have focused his writing energies on his own websites, including the Lovecraft Conservative, where the site mission statement made clear his specific brand of white nationalism. We believe in hierarchy, monarchy, the importance of breeding, and a definite and distinct ethnos, it said. We are unabashedly European. We support Europa, Christendom, and her children scattered across the colonies. Our enemy is materialism. Our enemy is liberalism, but we are not driven by hate, but rather by creativity. Walton also published a book last month called Empire Eternal in Defense of Imperialism. It was published by Antelope Hill, a Pennsylvania-based publishing house that is listed as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. The book seems to have put him on the radar of some big names in the far right. Earlier this month, when Antelope Hill tweeted out a link to the book, it earned a retweet from Bronze Age Pervert, a pseudonymous alt-right misogynist who has gained a large following in America, including among many on Capitol Hill. Welton, using the Spooky Nationalist Twitter account, thanked the Bronze Age Pervert for the boost, writing, "Your gesture will always be honored." Perhaps feeling emboldened, Welton last month started appearing in Terror House Radio, the podcast for Terror House Press, by publishing house run by Forney and neo-Nazi Brian Proctor. He appeared on 2 live stream episodes using his own name to promote another book he published with Terror House. Since September, when he started teaching at the elementary school, Walton has seemed to grow bolder and bolder and to also maybe prepared for being exposed. In a post on PO.st in late March, he wrote that he will be publishing multiple books this year and that he has started sending applications to mercenary groups across the world, including Singapore and Australia, in order to help our global fight. That same month, he posted a brief manifesto of sorts to POA.st, My Spooky Rules. The post began before listing off 13 rules. Being a white nationalist does not mean that all white men are your allies, stated rule number 3. Liberalism, Marxism, Enlightenment are mind parasites that mostly rot whites. But rule number 13 seemed to be the most telling. Operating in the darkness is preferable, Welton wrote, but a front-facing invisible presence is necessary to make dark work truly impactful. A few weeks later, Welton posted a menacing image to POA.st. It showed the book on Resistance to Evil by Force by Ivan Alexandrovich Ilyin, sitting on a table next to an empty pistol holster. Reminder, he captioned the poster. Only time will tell what becomes of Welton now, although it seems like he will likely no longer be teaching. If that scathing 2012 student review of him as a college professor at the University of Vermont isn't any indication, he won't be missed in the classroom. One of the weirdest teachers I've ever had, the student wrote. I'm convinced that the only positive comment found on this site was written by Ben Welton himself. Benjamin Welton is arrogant, and his egocentrism makes him a threat to the students merely as objects, especially us girls, to enhance his pride. The student also offered a prediction. Karma's gonna get you, Ben Welton. Okay, so we made it through the whole article, and it took almost 30 minutes to do. But yeah, they really dug into this man's background, and I'm glad that they did, because like I said, they didn't even have to touch on half of that, but they literally went in and did their research and their homework on who this guy really is. And his stuff dates back damn near 10 years when he started doing this, and he did all of this and was still teaching. And like I said, and before they even said, it's like, is he trying to get caught? Because it's like he used these different names. He eventually used his real name, but the thing is, by the time he had already used his real name, they had already figured out that it was him. But he just kept on going and going and going because they was allowing him to practically, get away with it. So what? He got fired. Like, he can just continue writing, and that's probably what he's going to do, and he knows that he can get away with it. But yeah, that's crazy. It's crazy, but it's not shocking or surprising. And there's many more Benjamin Weltons like this out in the world. I'm guessing that's his real name. But there's so many more out there in the world that are just like him. They gave you a couple examples in here, and like I said, the common theme is that they were all teachers. They were all in the school system somehow. Not saying that they're not present anywhere else, but they were somewhere, somehow, some form of fashion around kids where they could indoctrinate them. But yeah, that's pretty much going to be it for this video. The article pretty much laid it all out for us. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments, and I will talk to you in the next one.